The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guest or host will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk TCI Real Estate. Please use this opportunity to like and share this page with anyone who you know will be interested in hearing about what we are talking about today. So while I give you that opportunity to like and share the page, I would just like to say thank you to all of my faithful followers who continue to join me every Thursday at 5:30 on Let's Talk TCI Real Estate. And I also would like to say welcome to anyone who is watching for the first time. I welcome you. Please be sure to tune in every week and be a part of the conversation. I also would like to give special thanks to the team of Seven Security for being a part of the show on last week as we talked about home security in the Turks and Caicos Islands. They had a number of relevant devices and services that I think that you should consider looking into. Please take a look at their Facebook page and their website for more information on it. And for any of you who had missed the show on last week, please take a minute to go back, review the show. There is a lot of great information that I think you should be looking at and that will be able to help you, whether you are a resident on island and want to increase your home security, or whether you are an investor in the island also looking to do the same thing. So please be sure to check back and look at the recording from last week's show about home security. And one more thing I would like to say, if you have any questions or if you have any comments, please put it in the live feed so that we can get to those questions or comments while the show is progressing. So we have a short 45 minutes to do this show, but guess what? We are excited about the show today. I am actually excited about the show today because the person that we have as our guest, some of you, he's well known to you, and some of you, you've heard of him. But if you haven't met him, today is your day to be introduced to Bengt Soderqvist of Provident Limited. So with no further delay, I will ask Bengt at this time, please introduce yourself to the guests.
Well, you pronounced my name pretty good. I'm born and raised in Sweden, and I came to the Bahamas in 1965, late in 65. Took a survey job there. This show is not long enough to tell me why I wound up in the Bahamas, but that'll be for another time. And that's where I met Fritz Luddington, who was the guy that started Provident Limited and decided to do a development on Providenciales. And I came down with him and Tommy Coleman to Providenciales in the fall of 1966, and basically worked for him as the land surveyor, and I'm still working for Provident, and I'm part of it now and a director, and so I'm one of the few people that worked on the same thing for over 50 years.
So thank you, Bengt. So what made you decide to take that journey and to come to the Turks and Caicos Islands, if I may ask?
Well, as I said, I worked in the Bahamas. I was there for 6 months, and I would probably gone back to Sweden, but I had met Fritz there, and he had and the reason why I probably met him was that he was married. It was his second marriage, and there was a Swedish girl. So Chris and I were the only two Swedes on Great Exuma. So it was natural that we learned to know each other. Plus, Fritz had two turtles in Georgetown, which was probably the best spot on Great Exuma. So obviously I spent time there, but I started helping Fritz with how to get maps and stuff like that, because he was working on a proposal for development of Providence. And when he finally got his heads of agreement understood with the government, and it was time to start on the island, I started working for him, and we came down and started the development from scratch.
So tell me, how was when you came? How was the Turks and Caicos back then? How was life back then, and who were some of the key government persons at the time?
Well, Providence was more primitive than the Great Exuma, and I was told there was 450 people living in the three villages, Blue Hills, Five Keys, and the Bight. I remember one time, I think I said it in a newspaper article, and somebody called me up and said, no, there was 500 people here. They said, who knows, but anyway, I was told it was 450 people. A lot of the men was in Freeport in the Bahamas, working and making some money, because there wasn't much going on in Turks and Caicos. The sisal industry had died off. Once they started making nylon ropes, there was no market for sisal, and the salt industry was just petering off. And in those days, the salt islands were the important islands, so the people there considered themselves a little better, and they kind of looked down on the people I think lived in the Caicos Islands. That was in the little villages in the bushes up in the Caicos Islands. The salt was king in those days. So people had they cooked on charcoal, and most of the time the cooking was outside, just behind the kitchen, and they used kerosene lamps for light, and very much lived from sun up to sundown, and they did the fishing and conching, and most people had a field back in the bushes where they were growing sweet potatoes, cassava, peas, sugarcane, and that kind of stuff. So they needed very little cash. They had their sloops. They did trading with Haiti, and probably went 2 trips a year to Grand Turk and bought some staples, one in the summer and one before Christmas. And, to get flour and lard and a few things. Other than that, people lived off the land. So once we started, there was obviously big change. There was some relief work going on at that time, like in Blue Hills. The people were building, and the one that was looking after it was the district constable, and they were being paid by the government, and they were building a road, which means they went back in the bushes and brought rocks that was about this big, laid them in the sand. That's where the front of the Bay Road is today. It was probably about 10, 12 feet wide, I would say. And then they took the rocks and cracked them with a hammer, right, and got smaller rocks and put them in between the big rocks. and then went back down to the beach and got sand and spread it on top, and that work was going on, and I think it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon when there was a radio broadcast, and everything stopped because everybody went and listened. I think what people said, Turks is blowing. That's how they explained it, and there was the news and weather, and also people were sending messages. If they wanted somebody to to sail over there to the island or something like that, or what was going on. But people were very nice. There was absolutely no crime. The big crime in those days was one gentleman in Blue Hills when he'd been drinking a little too much of the moonshine. I think they named it Slop and Scrap Iron. There was probably some rum from Haiti.
Yes, I heard about the slop. I heard about it.
Yeah, and I never tasted it because it kind of smelled like kerosene. But anyway, but when he had a little too much to drink, he used to sit down in the middle of that road they were building and use some foul language. There was about the worst crime we had in those days. So there was. I feel really lucky to have been able to see it from what it was to what's there today.
What's there today?
I mean, I can talk for hours what my impressions was in the early days, but the people were very nice. They was very safe. It was great.
I like what you said, that being very precious back in those days. If only some things we can really go back to, but of course development happened and we had to move forward. Definitely, yeah.
Yep.
So for the benefit of persons who are listening, tell us exactly, or explain to us tell us about Provident Limited, and tell us about the significance that Provident Limited played in the development of the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Well, like always, there was a lot of factors that had to come in place at one time to this to happen. And I didn't really learn till afterwards, because I don't think Fritz ever told me. But according to one of his kids, said that their mother, Chris, his second wife, the girl from Sweden, had said that he was actually looking for a place a little further south in the Caribbean. But then it was a few factors that made him wind up on Providence Islands. But the main reason why he looked for another place was that he had been in the Bahamas for a few years, and as I said, he had a small inn there, the Two Turtles Inn. But by 1965, he started feeling that the Bahamas was probably going to go independent, and he thought that was going to be bad for business. So he started actively looking for another place. Simultaneously with that, there was an administrator in Grand Turk. There was the top government official. We didn't have governors in those days. The main man was named, he was appointed by the Foreign Office in England, and his title was administrator. His name was Tony Golding. And the reason why he got the job, and I read that in his memoirs, which is very interesting, he was a civil servant all his life, but he had introduced and got tourism going in one of the African colonies. I think it was Tanganyika. I guess it's Tanzania nowadays. So England was thinking that, well, sisal industry is gone, salt industry on the way out. We better see if we can do something else. So they said, let's send out Tony there and see if we can get something going. So the administrator had worked up some kind of proposal if he could find somebody who was interested, that they were going to make Crown land available on a lease purchase deal if somebody committed to start developing and do infrastructure and so on. Well, Fritz didn't know about that at that time, but he knew the governor of the Bahamas, which was Sir Ralph Gray. And I think as the governor of Bahamas also had some kind of jurisdiction over Turks and Caicos, but probably went down once a year and said, you know, I'm your governor, but you know, the administrator is the one to do the day-to-day work. So Sir Ralph had told Fritz that, well, if you're looking for a new place, you should go down and talk to Tony Golding. Mm-hmm. But also what Fritz had done, he and his wife used to go down to Puerto Rico because Fritz, both of them were private pilots. So they flew down there for some R&R. And they had flown over Turks and Caicos and saw all the land sitting there, the nice beaches and so on. And especially one time, I think they were on the way to Puerto Rico to a casino to do some gambling, and they ran into bad weather. So they had to turn around and go back to Great Exuma, but they had a lot of fuel. So they did a lot of low flying over, especially Providence. And Fritz could see that the potential, you know, and he liked the eastern part of Providence. I mean, all the North Caicos, middle and east have a very nice northern side with the beach and the ridge, but then you know how they taper off to a lot of tidal flats and so on. Providence is different. It has a nice south side, you know, the Long Bay Beach, because Providence is not in line with the other islands. It's a little further south, and so that's make it nice all around. And he liked the Sellers Pond. He had this picture how he could dig it out and make it into harbor, which now is Turtle Cove Marina. So he had it pretty well figured out, and so he started working a proposal. Actually, I remember when they were working on it, because Paula, the manager of the Two Turtles Inn, was actually typing it. It was back in the days when we had typewriters, you know, and you had to use carbon paper if you want to have a copy. Different world. You probably haven't even seen one, but anyway. So eventually he got this proposal together, and simultaneously with this, there were some people that he had met in Great Exuma that had some serious money that wanted to invest with him. I don't think they ever had the formal deal. I think they just kind of a handshake deal. Well, if you want to do something down the line, we'd put in some money and so on. And they were not really thinking that big to start with. They wanted to build an airport and a little inn and build their own homes and have a little extra land to sell to their friends and so on so they could make ends meet out of the project. And actually, I'm working on a book that you will see one day if I ever get done with it, where I will have some of the documentation of what I'm talking about now, because we have it in our archives. But he went to Grand Turk with his proposal, and I think he was looking for like 2,000 acres, and Fritz used to explain that, because he said in those days we landed in Grand Turk on the street. We named it the downtown strip because it was too complicated to use the regular runway, because there was a U.S. Air Force base, and you had to have written approval from Washington, D.C. So there was a road that ended up at St. Thomas Church in Grand Turk that we used. We used it probably for about 3-4 years in the late 60s and early 70s. And so he landed there, walked up to the government compound, and first he said he couldn't find anybody to they want to pay any attention to him, he said, because everybody was busy. And he realized what was going on. They were planning for the Queen's visit. There was in the spring of 66. So, but he said, eventually somebody realized that this is probably something we should listen to. So he said they forgot the Queen for a while, and we went up to this office and looked at the map and talked about it. And he said, well, if you commit to do some more, we'll make some more land available. So it was actually the government that suggested that the deal was going to be for 4,000 acres. And so eventually they must have had enough of an understanding, because by the summer of 66, Fritz and his investors started spending money, and as I said, we physically came down to the island. I think it must have been October 66 when we first came, and we came with a boat.
So sorry, what you're saying is that he started off just trying to look for 2,000 acres, and then the government proposed 4,000 acres.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
And the basic understanding in the Heads-of Agreement was that, and of course, in the meantime, Fritz had formed this company, Provident Limited, and the shareholders were, you probably heard about the Seven Dwarfs. So that's what the company named itself, was also the name of the boat. But okay. One was Teddy Roosevelt. He was actually the grandson of the President Theodore Roosevelt. He had a home on Great Exuma.
That's interesting.
He never managed to sell it, so he never came down to the island and built. And then there was Kip DuPont from the DuPont family, and later on his cousin Dick DuPont also. Then he was Rogers Morton, who was at that time a congressman from Maryland. Later on became Secretary of Interior under Nixon. So there was some substantial people. There were investors, and Kip DuPont, he built the house. I think he started in 1970, so he was one of the early ones, and he had his own plane. He used to come down and spend quite a lot of time. And you asked also about who the government people were at the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
We already talked. The government was, there wasn't many people. There was Tony Golding, the administrator. Finbar Dempsey was the magistrate. On each island, there was an elected representative. This was before the two-party system and all that, so they were in advisory capacity to the administrator. And the elected representative for Provincialis was Gus Lightbourne. Gus was very instrumental of getting Fritz to do things on Provincialis. As I said, there was almost like a jealousy between the islands, and then, as I said, the people on the Salt Islands, they felt that everything was going to happen there. But, Fritz liked Provincialis, so, if he hadn't got the approval, he would have gone somewhere else, you know.
So, sorry, so basically all this development with Provident Limited is restricted to only Providenciales then?
That's correct, yeah, and on the eastern part. And as I said, Gus Lightbond was very instrumental in that. You know, Gus was a very nice man. I really liked him. He probably didn't have a very much formal education, but he had a lot of common sense. And his thinking was that, well, if you get something going, people don't have to go to Freeport and make a living. They can stay home and make a living,
right.
And it sure worked like that for a long time.
So, question: so, what was your role in all of this? You were just came in as a surveyor at the time.
That's correct. The government did not have land registry or survey office or nothing. You know, we in this heads of agreement, there was specified where the land was going to be, and I made a tracing of that. There was an old map that was from 1910 that they had over in Grand Turk, and I had to go over there with my onion skin paper and make a tracing of it because that map was too big to carry around, and that was the basis what we started on, and then in the heads of agreement it explained the 4 areas that was going to add up to 4,000 acres. So my first job was to do the perimeter survey to locate the 4,000 acres. Simultaneously, like that, I worked on a topographic map so we could know where the hills were, so we could do some proper planning of where to put roads and so on. And there was very few stipulations that the government did. They described these areas that was going to add up to 4,000 acres, but they didn't know at that time exactly the boundaries because, you know, they had to get their records straight. And I must say that England acted very swiftly because by 1967, they must have realized that this is really something going to happen here. So they sent out surveyors. So they had two guys, Les Howell and Horace Wason. There was registrar and surveyor. And they came out and they basically, they named it a re-adjudication. They traveled all over the islands, held meetings in the villages, and people had to bring in, if they had any kind of proof of ownership, like there was some old crown grants and so on. And, you know, as I said, these fields that people had back in the bushes, they probably don't have any papers on it, but, you know, they were asked to cut their boundaries to show where their claims were. And so the neighbors agreed, you know, okay, yeah, this is your field, this is mine. And they were out chopping this, and they measured all this up. And all this was measured up, and the block plans that you still see, you know, that's when they were formed. So
sorry. So you were instrumental in the formation of all these original block plans then?
Well, I was measuring up the land that Provident was going to have transferred from the Crown to Provident. The government started now the survey office, and they had some young guys that started working there. One of them was Royal Robinson, for instance. And
yeah, he's still into surveying now, yes.
You know, later on, you know, became the chief land surveyor, you know, 30 years later, whatever it was. But anyway, but they got all the ownership straightened out, you know, so the people the local people that had a claim, they got absolute title. And what they did with some of the land where people had absolutely no proof, they gave what they named
provisional.
Yeah. And if nobody else claimed it after 20 years, you know, they was converted to absolute title. But that was very good, and it was good that they acted so swiftly because, you know, we have a very good land registry system, and that was all set up at that time. Actually, one funny thing was, you know, most of the block plans are in scale 1 to 2500.
Correct.
And I had come back from Sweden. I had made a topo map, and we had a plan for Long Bay because Provident was spending money and so on, but we wanted to get some subdivisions and put it on the market and start getting some money into the company. So we had to start with Long Bay because there was the only place where the government knew for sure there was, you know, they could give us the exact boundaries. They took like later into 67 before they knew exactly where the other areas were, because they had to straighten out the ownership of some of privately owned land. But I had this huge map with me from when I came back from Sweden, and I met with Horace Wason and Les Howell, and we were looking at it, and I had made a map in 1 to 2000. In Sweden, I worked a lot in scale 1 to 1000, but I figured here to get Long Bay to fit on one sheet, I had it in 1 to 2000, but it was a huge map. And these two guys were standing there because they tried to figure out the boundaries for their blocks. Right. So they drew them in there and decided at that time how the 10 blocks, which we see in Long Bay, you know, 61101, 61102, and so on. Correct. So they drew it up and they looked at each other and said, well, you know, and they shook their head. This doesn't fit, they said, you know. So then they asked me, I said, can you shrink this plan and make it 1 to 2500 instead of 1 to 2000? So I said, yeah, you know, that's no big deal. And the reason why they wanted that was that they had brought this cabinet with them from England, a mapping storage cabinet that was very, very nice. And that one had a certain width. And if we had made Long Bay into 1 to 2000, they wouldn't fit, you know. So we had to make the block plans smaller so they fit in the cabinet. So the bottom line is, if they had brought a wider cabinet, we would probably had block plans in 1 to 2000. But now we had to make them in 1 to 2500, and so we stuck with that. So we stuck with that ever since.
So that's the reason behind it.
Yeah.
Never heard that before. So
no. Had a lot of these things.
So let me ask you this question. So what exactly was the agreement between the Turks and Caicos government and Provident Limited?
Well, as I said, there was a lease purchase deal. The land was described where it was. And as I said, it took a little while to get it exactly pinned down. And there was about, from memory here, there was about 250 acres. It started at an old footpath. There was the old 5-key road, they named it. It was a footpath almost where the Blue Hill Road is today and into Thompson Cove. And then it went up to Blue Mountain, where there was some stone walls, and then it was privately land for a while. So the 250 acres includes what nowadays is Thompson Cove. Then we jumped over some private land, and then we started again a little west of Scotiabank. And there was the main piece in the middle there, which was probably about 1,600 acres from memory. And they went all the way along the beach, all the way up to in line with the old church in the Bight. You know, the one that Sam Delancey's church, we named it up on the hill. And just before you come to the Butterfield's Treasure Beach villas there. And then he went all across to the south side, Cooper Jack and so on, and included what now is Turtle Tail. Then there was the Long Bay, the whole peninsula there, which was about 1,200 acres. And then it was about 600 acres in the Grace Bay. And that's what those four areas added up to the 4,000 acres. So Provident had to start paying lease on the land. And in those days, it was in pound sterling. We had pounds and shillings and that kind of stuff in those days. I'm actually on my third currency because for a while in the early 70s, we had Jamaica dollar. And then eventually we were real lucky that we were allowed to use the US dollar, which made things very, very simple. But then, so now the land was considered, decided where it was. Then we had there was certain infrastructure that we had to do, and it was all specified in this heads of agreement. We had to put the roads between the three settlements. We had to build a runway that was 4,500 feet coral surface, and it was specified that one had to be outside the 4,000 acres. The government was going to tell us where they wanted it, and then we had to build I think it was a 10-room inn, and it was specified how much we had to spend. I mean, so many £1,000 or whatever. But I mean, I know what Fritz built, which was the third Turtle Inn. The company spent much more than what the requirement was, and then it was they were actually asking for a jetty in 5 keys when it was time to having a supply boat coming in. We were looking at where to put this jetty and realized that 5 keys was the wrong place because there was so shallow water you couldn't get up with a decent sized draft. So we went to the government, and that thing was shifted over. So we made soft dock instead. And then we had to build a road out there. And then there was a few more things that were specified there. We had to employ so many people for so many years or whatever. But we had 5 years to do these improvements. And by doing these improvements, the company had earned the right to convert the leasehold to freehold. So by 1971, in our archives, I've seen a big transfer when a lot of the land was actually transferred into Provident Limited, and so that was the basic deal. You know, this was like a seed project to get tourism going, and the only stipulations there were. These were basically going to be subdivisions to sell to foreigners for second homes. You know, and the government didn't want to have any small lots. So they said they want to have 1 acre lots inland and 2 acre lots on the beach. Other than that, there was very little little restrictions what we could do. There was no requirement for civic buildings for the government or anything like that, but we were only talking about 4,000 acres. And I mean, there was the old Crown grants, that the local people owned. I don't know how much that, but the majority of the island was still Crown land. So, of course, at that time, we didn't know if this was going to take off or not. But, if it did, which now we know it did, there was so much Crown land. So the government had plenty, to, when the time comes, to set aside for whatever government normally do, for civic buildings and schools and parks and boat ramps and whatever.
So let me ask you, because you were talking about the responsibility to create subdivision, there's two questions I want to ask about that. Do you feel confident to say that Provident Limited has fulfilled their part of the agreement with the Turks and Caicos Islands government? And the other question I want to ask, because you talk about subdivisions, is, have Provident Limited created any subdivisions with any beach access that we should be aware of? Because I know that's a big topic in TCI with beach access, just so we can get some idea about where some beach accesses exist.
Yeah, well, what we did when the subdivisions were planned, this we just used common sense and set aside places where you could go to the beach. Let's say if we look at Long Bay, for instance, there was 1,200 acres, and I think it was a total of 870 lots, because, as I said, they had to be 1 acre or 2 acre. Very few was on the beach, and if you're going to sell the inland lots, you better provide a place where people can go swimming, or people were not going to buy them. So I think we have 5 places in Long Bay where the inland lots can go to the beach. But and the same thing with
so basically public beach accesses.
Well, these were done as an amenity to the subdivisions, and to be able to sell the land, which most of it in the early days was sold through a realtor named Ford Carter in Delray Beach that Fritz had made an agreement with, and they were sold. People basically sight unseen. People just bought them from the map, and but let me come to that later on. But the big beach was actually government owned, because when I explained those 4 areas, Gus Lightbourne, who I'm sure was very instrumental in where the land was going to be, because Tony Golding, being from England, he couldn't know very much about what the land looked on Providence. I'm sure he listened pretty much to the elected members, what they wanted. So Gus wanted the Crown to hang on to the land in front of the bight. There was a couple of reasons. He said people go in the sea in the summer. I guess that there was the expression. You didn't say you go swimming. You say went in the sea. But also the sloops that everybody had in the summer when it was offshore wind. People kept their sloops anchored in front of the bight out there. And you remember Kingston Well up there where they got their water. But so we had to jump over a whole mile. We when I surveyed it, we ended up roughly where Treasure Beach is today, and then we started again up where then Ledec, well, Siboney nowadays. So that beach was that was going to stay as Crown reserve, you know. So I mean, if and all that changed later on, but if they had stuck with the guns like Gus and the people wanted, we could have had a big beach right in front of the bite, you know, the best beach there. You know how when you go to eastern Florida, you know, all the cities, Fort Lauderdale, Delray Beach and so on, you know how A1A goes very close to the beach, and they always have a section, a pretty long section, where everybody can go swimming. And across the road, across A1A, you have the hotels and so on, and the guests will have to cross A1A on walkways, but it's shared. It's a shame that they didn't stick with the guns and had that, because I think that would have been great. But it is what it is. You know, that whole mile kept on shrinking, and developments were happening there on the beach. And I think now we are down to Rotary Park. It's about the only thing that's left of it. You know, the one next to the deck. Right. But that was the big one. But you know, then when it came to the other subdivisions, the one that have the big area that we named the Turtle Coast subdivision, that goes from the north side to the south side, you know, we had, I think if you start from the inlet to Turtle Cove Marina, on the beach there, I think we set aside about 13% of the beachfront for outlet. And of course, the big one is the park where the, you know, right in the bite there, you know, which is the only,
fish fry happens.
I think we set aside about 950 feet there. We actually, the land have grown a lot there. It's a lot of accretion. And the reason why we made that one so big was that there wasn't enough width on the land to make lots. Other than that, I remember we saying, you know, it's kind of more than we need, because the government is reserving a whole mile in front of the bite, you know. But now I'm glad we did set aside that, because I think that's the only one that the only nice open space on the beach on Providence Islands.
Okay.
But in general, you know, we just these outlets to the beach were an amenity to the subdivisions, and it was just common sense. If you're going to sell land to people on an island, you know, you have to provide so they can go swimming, and so.
Sorry, remind me how many you say there are in Long Bay for the subdivision?
Well, it's three big ones. That is where we set aside land so you can have parking. So you know, if people were too far away to walk to them, they can take a car and go down and park. And then on top of that, there was two footpaths where there was no provision for parking space. They were more for the people that lived inland within walking distance. So all in all, it's five places in Long Bay.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Is there anything about Provident Limited that you think is worth clarifying at this particular time that people should know about or need to know about? You know, because a lot of persons have heard about Provident. A lot of people didn't understand the story of Provident. Is there anything else you think you should put out there about Provident Limited and the whole deal with Turks and Caicos Islands government?
Well, Provident was Fritz Luddington, you know. I mean, he's the guy that came up with this idea, and it was probably a pretty loose agreement, but you know, he was an honorable man, and he stuck to his guns, and he said what he's going to do, and did it. You know, that Um, and I used to say, the government wanted a seed project, and it worked. I mean, I saw some places up in the Bahamas on the outer islands where they had tried similar thing, but nothing really happened. Nobody came and built, and the roads just grew over the bushes again. And of course, when we started this thing, we didn't really know how it was going to turn out. It was quite a gamble, I think, and because nobody knew about Turks and Caicos in those days. I remember telling people where I was working, and they said, Turks and what? There was nobody ever heard about it. The only ones that knew about Turks and Caicos, most of them were stamp collectors, because we had very nice stamps, and also there were some ham operators, the radio operators, because they have this idea of collecting unusual destinations, and the call sign for Turks and Caicos was VP5. So I was actually a ham operator for a while, and when I got on the air, everybody wanted to talk to me because they want to collect the VP5, in their resumes. So stamp collectors and ham operators were probably the only ones that knew about it. So, I mean, I hope one day Fritz get the recognition that he deserves, because I mean he was responsible for a lot of things we are looking at today, or there was the original guy that got you going, and actually the first tourists that came most of them were landowners, because when I probably mentioned, we had this realtor from Delray Beach, Ford Carter, and he was selling the land, and at that time we offered the land with 1% down and 1% a month, and most people, as I said, bought it from a map. They had never seen it, but they started making payments. And we had this deal that if they came down and inspected what they had bought, if they did that within 2 years, they didn't like what they saw. They could swap and use the equity to some other lot in the same
subdivision
category. You may have seen this map here, that where we had the definition with H for hill and V for view, and
yes.
T tract and so on. So some people came down and said, "Well, gosh, I'd rather be on that road over there." Then we swapped them around. So as things went on, it was a very, very slow start, and we were building the third Turtle Inn. Well, I probably didn't mention that to you, but Ray Ward, we have a Ward construction now with David
yes.
Ward.
Yes.
David's dad, Ray, he had built 2 Turtles Inn in Georgetown for Fritz, and Fritz brought him down, and he actually arrived in February 1967 and started building the third turtle, and most of the men on the island came up to, they named it the hill, came up to the site where the third turtle was going to be built, and I was looking for a job then. And I remember that day because I had had the survey crew working for me for a couple of months to get things ready to make some maps. And I was going to leave when Ray came in, so he took over my survey crew and then probably hired another 50 people there that one morning. And the pay scale was £1 a day in those days. But then I remember that they wanted a raise, so I think it was raised to £1.05, which must be £1.05.
Right.
I think there was a slow beginning, you know.
Slow beginning, but it got there.
Oh, well, it did happen, you know, and you can see the result now. And I used to say that the government, they wanted a seed project, and Fritz was the one that planted the seed, and you know, the seed sprouted, and this little plant came up there, and you know, sometimes he was probably struggling, and then it almost looked like he was going to die, but it made it, and then eventually it became a few more plants, you know, like the seed in itself, and it kept on spreading, and now if you look at it, now we have a whole flower bed. So the challenge that I see it today is, you know, that you have a flower bed, you better take care of it because you can't let it grow wild. It doesn't look good. So you need to have it looking good. You need to trim it and weed it and so on. And so the question is now, the government now have a tourist industry. They got what they wanted, you know. So now the challenge is to take care of the flower bed and make it look good. And so let's see if they're up to it.
So are you proud? So then, are you proud of where we are today in terms of development? Then,
well, it's as I said, I feel blessed, you know, to have been involved in something like this. I think it's very unusual to see what we saw back in '66, and had followed it through to what it is today. You know, there've been a lot of ups and downs, and as I said, there was some places in the Bahamas that nothing ever happened, you know, and you know, Fritz had a very good philosophy. I mean, he was a visionary. I mean, he could picture this thing, and unfortunately, he passed away already in 1976. But you know, some of the early deals we had to make to get things going was just unbelievable. You know, David Eline was one of the first to build a house on the beach on the north side, and we had to make this big piece of land for him on the beach at the end of the cul-de-sac because he wanted to have privacy. And then we had to dig the canal, you know, the one that goes through Turtle Cove Marina, that goes underneath the bridge and goes to the east up to his property, so he could have a little boathouse and have a little Boston whaler there that he could go fishing with. And when it was all said and done, I think he had 400 feet of beachfront there. I think he paid $10,000 for it, but then he committed to build a house, and that was the thing that was important, to have somebody building and not just
occupying
have the land sitting there, you know.
So, because you said, tell me about your first Providence first real estate transaction.
Well, the first ones were those that Ford Carter was selling sight unseen, you know, and which actually became the first tourists. Another very early tourist was Walter Thompson, and he had his girlfriend Lise with him at that time. He, for some reason, wound up in South Caicos, and we had a little airline, Caicos Airline at the time. Henry Rucker took him over to to Providence. So Ray was still building the third turtle, and I remember we had to make him and Lise a place to stay. And they were in what later on became room number 4, I think, at the third turtle. And even the floor was not poured yet. They just had crushed rocks that they were sitting on. But at that time, he and Liz walked all over the beach. I mean, they were the only ones on the whole stretch. And he liked it down what later on became Thompson Cove. And I think he bought 26 acres on that trip down there. Eventually, he bought a little more and made a subdivision that you know as Thompson Cove today. But I think that was 1967 that he actually bought the 26 acres. I don't remember how much he paid, but it wasn't very much. But anyway, there was. As I said, eventually it got going. You know, there was along the line there was different things that happened that made it go faster. I mean, the Club Med deal was probably made a big jump of the island, because Club that gave us the airport got upgraded to FAA standard, which eventually gave us Pan Am, which was the first airline that we ever had that we knew how to pronounce, and so there was a few things. I mean, as I said when we started, I could talk about this for days. You know, I don't know how many details you want to go into.
Okay, so just I want to pause for just a minute. We have already reached our 45 minutes time frame. Obviously, we have gone over it, but just in case there's anyone out there with any questions about Provident Limited or anything else, this is your opportunity to ask those questions if you wish. Please send those questions in before we wrap it up. With that said, Bengt, I want to ask you, did you not do a deal in exchange for ice cream? Please tell us about that.
Yeah, there was very early on in the first store. It was Simmons' store, which was downtown, just where the roundabout is, where you turn off to the airport on the east side of that roundabout. There was a family from Texas, Pete and Sunshine, and their 2 sons, Ron and Herb. And Ron and Herb was basically running it, and you know, in those days you didn't walk around with any money in your pocket, you know, and now and then I used to stop in there and get an ice cream, you know, from their freezer, and they put a little sheet in their cash register, you know, so we marked it down, and now and then I guess I paid them, you know. So Ron and Herb had bought some land from Teacher Howell up in the mountain, and then they decided that they were going to split the land between them and take title. You know, there was like 4 acres, so they were going to have like 2 acres each. And when they split it, they realized that one of them didn't have access to the road, because I had a piece of land that was between the road and Ron's land, and that they came to like a little triangle that was completely useless to me, but you know, we played the game, and I said, yeah, you know, I'll send you the tip on the triangle there. I think I sold him 100 feet, so he got 100 feet of frontage on the road. So then we were going to decide what to pay for it. So I said, well, why don't you just give me ice cream, like instead of writing it down in the cash register for the next year, I can stop in and get ice cream. Yeah, it's the deal. Just don't bring all the kids from the school with you. You know, this is for your consumption. Yeah, sure. So I asked the registrar. I think it was Jim Wright, the guy from England at the time. He was registrar and chief land surveyor. I said, can I put it on the, instead of the consideration on the transfer? Sure, he said, you can put anything. So there is a registered transfer document in the archives at the land registry that says that you know, this land was transferred instead for so many dollars, he said, for free ice cream for 1 year or something like that.
So you actually have a copy of that register?
I did get one, actually. Alice Williams dug it out of the archives and made me a copy 1 year. And I've been looking for it, but you know, my place is quite a mess. So I hope I can find it, or I have to ask the new registrar for another copy. The parcel doesn't exist any longer because it was all combined, you know, and changed. But they have all those back in the archives. So yeah, that's a unique transfer document.
So you didn't transfer for love and consideration or for money. You transferred for ice cream. I hope you got all of your ice cream worth.
Yeah, it was good. Well, they made it simpler, you know.
All right. I didn't see any comments or any questions that came in. I just want, in closing, Bengt, I want to say, what can you say to anyone who's aspiring to invest in real estate? You have been there from the beginning, and you are still active in real estate as of today's date. And I feel that a lot of real estate agents, including myself, we look up to you as a real estate icon when it comes to, because of how long you have been in the game, since 1966. What do you say to persons who are aspiring to get into real estate, or even persons who are interested in investing in real estate? What type of words would you share with them today?
You asking me what things are worth and stuff like that, or
what would you say to anybody based on who's thinking about, anyone who's thinking about investing at this stage in the game? Is this a good time to invest? You know, what would you say to them?
I don't think over this time, I don't think there ever been a time when things have gone down. There was actually at one time we had a little setback. Other than that, it'd been a steady rise, you know. But you know, I mean, the short answer is, because I get this question often in my office, and I always pull out my office drawer like this and I start looking.
Sorry.
Earlier I said, you know, but I can't find it.
Sorry, repeat what you said. I think I lost the sound for just a minute. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No. I said normally when I get answered that question, you know, what things going to be worth and so on. I said, well, you know, I just lost my crystal ball, so I can't tell you for sure. No, I think I think we still have a nice future in the Turks and Caicos, and it's. I mean, it was a super place when I first got there, and I still love it, you know. So as I said, I feel very lucky.
Well, that's good. And is your door still open to anyone who wants to understand more about real estate and even what Provident is all about? Please let me know that.
Okay. Oh yeah, and I just need to get organized and get my book out, you know, because as I said, you know, what I've been talking about now, you know, should be recorded, and but I can also back it up with a lot of the early agreement, that we have in the archives and pictures. I have a lot of pictures and so on. But we probably made a few mistakes. But actually, I should tell you one thing, which is kind of interesting, because Leeward Highway, I had made some suggestions how we were going to do the subdivisions and so on. And I mean, I'm a surveyor. I'm not really a town planner, but I did work when I was in Sweden. I worked with my former boss, who was a town planner, and we came up with some suggestions and stuff. And one time when I came back, we showed Fritz what we thought we should do with a certain area, and that was the main road, which now is Leeward Highway. And I had set aside 100 feet right away for it. And Fritz was just about ready to send me home to Sweden and being crazy, because he said, "What are you doing, boy?" He said, "Here, I mean, we got an old Jeep, a pickup truck, and a dump truck, and you're going to waste 100 feet on the road?" And I remember arguing with him. By then I knew enough English, I could argue with him and I'd say that well, we may never need it, because we didn't know what was going to happen. But I said, who knows? If it ever happened, it's I've seen it in Sweden. When you need to widen the main road, you have to buy up houses and tear them down, and if we never need them, we just plant trees on them, But so when I mean, now I wish I had set aside 120 feet, because that's going to be needed when it's time to do 6 lanes on Leeward Highway, which is not too many years away, Because if you keep on allowing 12 stories in Grace Bay, there are going to be more people landing on the airport, and it's only one road they can get from the airport to Grace Bay. So that's coming, but that's progress. And but the other thing, and what I was really going to tell you, because I had the road going, more or less the main road going straight through where the Do-It Center's parking lot is now in the valley. And Fritz said, he looked at it, he said, we're going to pick up people at the airport and take them into Third Turtle. He said, we need to show them the views somewhere. Can't you pull the road up on the hill so they can see over to Five Keys? So actually that's why you have those 2 curves. That doesn't really make sense. The one by Ariel Missick's office and the one by Do-It Center, because we pulled up the road there, and very often when we took them in from the airport to the Third Turtle, they were riding in the back of a pickup truck, and they said, "Stop!" and they wanted to take a picture, there by where Do-It Center is today.
Right.
And that probably made sense for several years, but today you better look at the traffic and not on the view. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's why we have those 2 crazy curves.
One last question I have for you before we wrap it up. Did Provident Limited have anything to do with the boundaries for the settlements? Just to know, like, where, just say Long Bay, the Bight, etc. Just a question that came to mind.
The boundaries with the settlement?
Just to know where each settlement is located, starts and stops.
Well, no, that was those were all plotted on the block plans by the government registrar and surveyors. They, as I said, they had the people show proof of ownership as much as they had, because there was some old Crown grants, and especially like behind Blue Hills, between Blue Hills and the airport, you have Stammer's estate. That's where a lot of the people in Blue Hills had their fields, and that's where they made their claims. And the people that had the fields cut out their own boundaries, and it was all plotted. And the government actually gave the people the benefit of the doubt, because I think the claims were slightly more than the land, so they set aside a little extra outside the old Stammer's estate on the west side to make up for the difference. Everybody got their claims, and as I said, all this was done back, I think it was 1967. That basically all that was registered, and that's, I think, is a plus. That we had such started the land register system from scratch. Which made it very, very simple.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bengt. It was a pleasure to have a conversation with you today. It was very interesting information, even to hear about the startup of Provident Limited, who were involved in Provident Limited, what was the agreement with the government, how we got from 2,000 acres to 4,000 acres. Even more so interesting to hear about how real estate transactions were conducted then, and even your ice cream story, very interesting. Definitely, like I said before, in the real estate industry, we all, well, let me speak from my perspective. I look up to as someone in real estate because you've been there from the beginning and you are here still in real estate. And every time I ask you, what time are you going to retire, Bengt? You're still not in retirement mode. But that's a very good spirit, because I think you still have a lot to offer. And I'm happy that your doors are always open to anyone who is interested in knowing anything about the island and also knowing about real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I know you have been very helpful to a lot of agents on this island. And I know that you're still playing a very important role in the real estate in the Turks and Caicos Islands, even at this time right now. So thank you so much for joining us today. All right. And I would also just like to say in closing, I thank you so much for everyone who have joined us for this program. I hope that the information was also informative to you. Bengt, can you please provide your information for anybody who would like to reach out to you even about real estate or anything about the Turks and Caicos Islands? Please provide your email or your contact information at this time.
Yeah, you want me? Well, it's my first name, Bengt, BENGT @tciway.tc.
Thank you so much. So. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next week, stay safe and remain blessed. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much, Bengt.
Okay. Nice to do it. Take care.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guest or host will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer.